Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with Foul Play. Welcome to the podcast. And our podcast today is entitled Trial Tunnel Vision Part 1. And I'm the host of the podcast, and my name is Dr. Silkman. And all of us on the panel would like to welcome you, our regular listeners, our new listeners to the podcast. And we value your input and we value your questions, and we'll be monitoring the questions during the podcast, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. Our Foul Play channel has now reached 690 subscribers, and that's awesome. And we thank each and every one of you guys. If you like what we do, please hit the subscribe button. If you don't like what we do, that's cool, but let us know so we can improve in the future. We're not perfect. We try our very best. And our Foul Play channel has received over 135,000 views of our videos. And as you know, we have a huge number of phone calls between Stephen Avery and other family members, as well as other people. And I urge you guys, if you have some time, please have a listen to them. They're really, really important. Joining me today on the podcast, we have our regular researchers. We have Bibi, Kelly85, we have Christy, Millbilly, and on chat, we have Sammy and Zoe, who'll be looking at the YouTube channel and taking your questions. And it is with great delight that I'd like to welcome back our guest researchers, the YouTuber Linda Kay, and also Susan Sims. Welcome, guys. All right, I have an announcement before we start the podcast proper. This week, there will be no TTT at the regular time on the 9th, but there'll be a special TTT on the 10th, and we have a special guest. And of course, guys, we welcome everyone to have a listen to that podcast on the 10th with our special guest. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to be back. And if you remember, we left last week's podcast on slide 166. And we'll only just briefly have a look at that slide. And it's a real interesting one because Stephen made the comment, the evidence don't make no sense. And as you know, on the podcast, what we do here is we look at MAM 1, the way it was presented in a chronological order. And what we do is we invite members of the panel to make comments about the slides and what transpired in MAM 1. And of course, guys, we also invite our viewers, our listeners, to ask questions as well. And we'll try and answer them as best as possible. The important thing about slide 166 is that Stephen was confused about the evidence. Now, he was also making a lot of phone calls to his family. Christy, would you like to spend a few minutes talking about what you've listened and learned to regarding the phone calls? Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. I can't really say that we've learned anything new. We've definitely been able to fill in some pieces and just verify things that we didn't know.
Yes.
We've discovered that Ken Kratz was working in the background to stop Stephen from getting out of prison on his property bond. The
Yes.
timing of all that is very coincidental with Brendan being interrogated in late February, early March, and being arrested.
Yes.
I mean, you just learn a lot about how he was feeling. You hear a lot of his frustration and just, I mean, you hear him talking to his family. He's trying to recall the events from October 31st. None of it, he says it a million times. It don't make no sense. Don't make no sense.
Yes.
Nothing makes any sense.
Yes. And Christy, would you state or say that from what you've listened to, the phone calls, that the family really was in a bad state of disarray and a lot of tension?
They were. They definitely were, especially coming. I don't want to call it the end because we know it's not the end, but the last calls we have are from May of 2006 right now. And
Yes.
you can definitely hear the family falling apart. Everybody is, I shouldn't say everybody's at each other's throats to a degree, but Steven is
Yes.
really just at war with just about everybody. He's feeling neglected. He's feeling like everybody's put him on the back burner. And it's
Yeah.
hard because you can see it from all sides. I mean, obviously, just because Steven's sitting in prison doesn't mean that everybody else's life stops and normal life has to continue. And I mean, he's not
Yes.
okay with it. It's just the family really is just falling apart at the end.
Yes, and it's amazing how Stephen has a go at all of his brothers, Barb, anyone that he can point a finger at. He really was getting very desperate, and you could tell um, the frustration in his voice. And is it true that he even wanted to sue the salvage yard as well?
Yes, in one of the last phone calls to Chuck, if you look at the summaries, I've
Yeah,
summarized every single call that we have right now of Stevens. It's in the last it's in the last 10 to 12.
yeah,
All the ones in May of 2006 that I marked to listen to, I believe are important to listen to, and it's important to listen to all of them because it builds a story and it tells you exactly what was going on. And at that point, they had put
yeah.
Steven was trying to give his grand dam to Jody, and they put it in the impound, and he would threaten to sue the salvage yard for
Yes,
stealing his vehicle, and he's going to
yeah.
sue everybody. And I've heard before that that's his main defense all the time is he jumps to
Is
I'm
to
going to
sue
sue
someone.
you. Yes, he does
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, those last 10 or 12 calls are essential listening. It really shows the dynamics of what was happening between Stephen and his family, but also it indicates that, remember, I'm sure Ken Kratz was listening in as well and
Somebody
building up a,
was.
yes, and building up a picture of what was happening between, Stephen and the family. And Christy, would you like to make a quick final comment? He was visited by a pastor. Is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure if she actually was able to visit him
Okay.
at the point of the calls, but she did contact the family at some point. Um, she went to Dolores's house. They somehow hook up. I know Jody starts talking to her in those last calls we hear in May. It sounds like Jody is at war with the Averys as
Yes.
well, and she wants
Yes.
to leave, and she's gonna go stay with this pastor lady. And I'm not knocking anybody's religion, anybody's beliefs or anything, but those calls, I mean, to hear Stephen talk to that pastor is just a completely different.
Yes.
I'm just not sure what to make of it. I had no real words for those phone calls. I was
Yeah.
just kind of.
Yes.
I don't mean to laugh, but they're
No.
hilarious. They're
No.
hilarious.
Yes. I think it's called 835, which is with the pastor. I think it is. Anyway, it's on our Foul Play YouTube channel. And look, Christy, I personally and everyone on the panel, and I'm sure our listeners would like to thank you and Zoe for your incredible hard work that you've done with those calls. It certainly opened up my eyes to really know what was happening in the background. Um, yeah, it was incredible. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much,
you.
Christy.
I
Thank you.
enjoy doing them, and I want to thank the people that foia them. AC Rookie, Kaboom Blam Zoom, and of course both Zoe and I believe Jeff helped too. Anybody who got
Yes,
them all put up, and I was the end. I'm the bottom stair. I'm the bottom stair. I
yes.
just I just did the summaries. I just listened. Everybody else put a lot of hard work into these as well. And from what I
Fantastic.
understand, we have a lot more coming.
Isn't it like 51 more CDs?
Something like that, which I estimate to be
Okay.
somewhere in the area of 2,500 phone calls.
All right. Now, Christy, just let us know if you want us to do a GoFundMe for your therapy at the end. um, now, I'd like to ask the panel, would anyone else like to make a comment before we start our podcast proper on those phone calls? Anybody else have any comments? Linda, do you have a
Oh
comment?
yeah, I'm definitely recommend everybody listen to them, especially the last ones that Christy marked. Listen to. they really, I mean, that is it. It tells a lot. But every single one of them, and I am fortunate enough to have made them through. I've I've listened to them all.
Yes.
I can't remember a lot of the small talk ones, but
Yes.
just the phone calls alone will tell you such a story without even looking at a document. It is
Yeah.
just unbelievable. And I want to say thank you so much to Christy and Millbilly for doing it and anybody else who did it. I really appreciate it. Really cleared up a lot of things for me personally.
Fantastic. Thank you, Linda. Christy, do you have a comment?
I lost it. I had it and then it left.
Okay, no worries. And yes, of course, Millbilly also is uploading some of the phone calls and doing an analysis of them. And we urge all our listeners to go check out Millbilly's YouTube channel, and also Linda has a YouTube channel as well with some fantastic information. All right, Christy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to mention, I believe Linda and I are going to be talking about the calls next Tuesday on her channel. Well, this coming Tuesday, I believe it is now, right, Linda?
Yep, sure will. Can't
So
wait.
go watch us on Linda
Fantastic.
Kay's channel as well. I believe it's 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday the 7th.
Exactly.
Yes. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you guys. You're really incredible, valuable resources for the research community. And yeah, it certainly has opened my eyes listening to those calls. And really, if we just finish slide 166, the important point is this, and you can see that we've discussed this many times during our podcast, and that is, and I'll read it, the state presented a murder scenario that could not be backed up forensically. And you can listen in the phone calls because Stephen continuously shows complete shock. He's got no idea about the RAV, the key, and other pieces of forensic evidence that the state say they had. And if we now go into slide 167, we can actually start our podcast proper, and hopefully we'll be able to get through a lot more slides in today's podcast. But the as we know, a lot of the members from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department were on the salvage yard, and a lot of them were involved in searching the trailer, searching the buildings, searching the garage. The two in particular that we are all interested in are both Lenk and Colburn. And both Sergeant Tyson and Deputy Kucharski, they were there on the salvage yard as well. And they're from Calumet, they were there to watch over the detectives from Manitowoc. Millbilly, can you tell us why those two sheriffs, or the sergeant and the deputy, were there? Why were they in the first place?
You're talking about from Calumet or from Manitowoc?
From well, from both. Why did we have to have this bizarre arrangement?
Well, it's just strange because they state that Manitowoc was there just for helping them with security needs. But
Yes,
that's not the fact because we see in CASA reports that they're in there with the search teams helping them search for things. But when there's something found, they mention nothing about Manitowoc officers.
yes,
Kucharski found the key,
correct,
not
correct.
Link and Colborne. Just like in
Yeah,
the Manitowoc report, when Remaker and Link talk to Stephen Avery on the 4th, they don't mention Link. They just mention Remaker. They're
yes.
cherry picking on what they want to add in their reports and leaving stuff out.
Yeah, thank you, Millbilly. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we all know about the key that was found in Stephen Avery's bedroom. But what is remarkable, and Colburn even revealed it in his CASO report, which was only a couple of lines out of the entire CASO report, he didn't mention the key. Are you surprised at all by this, Millbilly? That the that the key was not mentioned?
Yeah, it's very strange. And why is Dietering or Fassbender stating the key was found on the 7th? It may just be a
Yes.
typo, but it shouldn't be a typo because it's a search warrant.
Correct. Correct. Oh, look, there are many errors in CASA, that's for sure. Sammy, do you have a comment? Thank you,
Yeah,
Milby.
Bean Green is asking, why do you think they had two different dates for finding the key, Billy?
I don't know. Why do they have two different case files put out for this in Calumet County? When the crime lab gets the report, they even question like, why do we have two different case numbers for the same case?
Yeah.
It's like they started one investigation and realized that it was not going to go the way they wanted, so they started another one.
Yes. Yes. And we all know about the RAV4 apparently
Yeah,
in one of the reports being found on the 3rd,
yeah.
right? But then
There's so many discrepancies in the reports, search warrant affidavits. Like the year of the car goes from a 99 to a 98 to a 97 to a 94.
yeah,
And
yeah,
these are all
that's
on search warrant affidavits. Why
yeah,
are they? It can't
yeah,
be a clerical error because it happens too many times.
correct, correct. Yeah, look, I have no answer for that. I mean, but you're right, Millbilly, and that's an excellent question as well. Um, there are many errors, but if we have a look at slide 167, this really talks about the discovery of the key.
Yes.
And we all, BB, do you have a comment?
Just that maybe they're confusing planting days with binding days.
well, yeah, that's true.
Well,
That
it
is
also
true.
makes me wonder when we hear on the transmission from Manitowoc on the 7th, we have a few items we need an investigator to come look at. What are these items?
Yes,
I mean, you got the
yes,
officer notes from Bushman on the back of it. They have a list of things. Or is it a list of things they were looking for, or is there a list of things they found?
yes. That's a good point. That is a very good point. Well, if we can continue with slide 167, and they're excellent points, Millbilly. Remember, the investigator and law enforcement went inside Stephen Avery's trailer, gave it a check over. They're obviously looking for Teresa Hallbuck at this stage, a body. And they obviously gave the a trailer a quick look over, and they were in there several times. No one saw a key.
Nope.
Then what do we find? What, in fact, Millbilly, what is the date that the key was found?
Well, if you read Fassbender's affidavit search warrant, it says it was found on the 7th.
Right?
But if you read the other one, it says it was found on the 8th.
On the 8th. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if that's the thing, it's even said in trial, Tyson and the Manitowoc officers were there searching,
Yes.
and Calumet's job was to watch them.
Correct.
Why are
Correct.
they babysitting other officers? And
Correct.
out of all the officers in that department, why are the very two that just
Yes.
get depositions
Yes.
there every time something is found?
Oh, look, there's no question. It's completely bizarre, right? But if we look at the build up to this, uh, law enforcement officers were in Stephen Avery's trailer. They checked it over. They didn't find any evidence that any type of crime took place. They certainly didn't find any keys. Now, it's true, maybe they weren't looking for keys at this particular stage, but if you have a look at the photographs that were taken of the bookcase, you can see that it was jam packed full of material, right? Now, Lenk on the stand said that the bookcase got emptied and he saw no key in the bookcase, right? So, what happens here? Now, is it true that it was Kacharsky that was sitting on the bed taking notes?
Yes, according to them, Kacharski was on the bed. Colburn was fussing around with the cabinet bookcase. Link left the room to get more boxes and bags to bag up the pornos they found. And
Yes,
upon re-entry into the room, he said, "Look, there's a key."
there's a key. Yeah. Well, Well, if we actually dissect that a little bit further, right? You got Kacharsky. I mean, Stephen Avery's bedroom, if you have a look, it's actually quite small. So the little cabinet would have been fairly close to Kacharsky, right? Now, he even admitted that he was doing other things as well, right? And for some unknown reason, Colburn gave the excuse that he decided to shake, rattle, and roll the cabinet. He decided to, quote, handle it really roughly. And he didn't hear or see the key on the ground, right? And as you said, Millbilly, Lenk left, came back in, and oh Lord, what do we find? We find a key with a blue lanyard, right? And Colburn was asked, did anyone touch the key? And he said, nope. We all looked at the key, and simultaneously, everyone thought, this is a eureka moment. It's an important key because it's got Toyota, right? Of course, they found the Toyota RAV4 on the premises on November the 5th, the Saturday. Pam of God did. So all of a sudden, we now have the RAV4, and conveniently, we have the key, right, found in the bedroom. And the the reason that the key suddenly materialized is because Colburn really shook the cabinet, and somehow no one heard the key fall to the ground. Now, guys, from the panel, does anyone have any comments about that key? Anyone like to make any comments? BB.
Well, he supposedly roughly shook the cabinet, but all the change is still in the same place.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Susan, do you have a comment about the key?
I don't think it's possible that that key could have been hidden in the way that it said, with that cabinet empty, looking in, that you would not have seen it. There's
Yes.
just no way.
Yes, and apparently the cupboard had a lot of materials on in the cupboard and on top of the cupboard as well. Again, the main problem I see, guys, is the chronology of the pictures, when the pictures were taken. Kelly, do you have a comment?
That key was a burden on the case also, because even Ken Kratz said in this, the court, forget about the key, even if it was planted, because he knew that could have been really damaging if,
Correct.
they
Yeah.
pressed on that.
Yes, yes, correct. A really good point. And it's very interesting, guys, and also for our listeners, that Buting actually held up the key in court, and he was going to drop the key on the ground so that the jury and the judge can hear, hey, look, if you drop the key, you're going to hear it, because no one mentioned hearing the key fall to the ground. Now, you've got a metallic object that's rustling around, apparently in a cabinet, that's going to fall to the ground on the carpet. And Buting was about to drop the key. What did Ken Kratz do? Guys, anyone want to make a comment on what Ken Kratz said when Buting held the key up?
He freaked
Christy.
out and said no way, that we couldn't recreate it. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he had a fit about doing this. And
Correct.
this was never planned. And we're going to need to get the bookcase in here and recreate the whole. He wanted to, yeah, he said no way. And the judge
Yes.
went for it.
Yes,
Buting should have just
correct.
dropped the key anyway and said, oops.
Correct. Now, thank you, Christy. Now, there's no question. The way you could tell by the way Ken Kratz works, he begs for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. So if that was Ken Kratz with the key, he would have dropped the key and then said, "Oops, sorry, judge," but the message would have gotten out. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Myard is saying they had the RAV for 2 days at this point. So when did they log to corroborating the lanyard?
You mean for
To the
planting,
corroborating lanyard. Not sure.
or to match the key to the lanyard? because they did find the lanyard, the rest of the lanyard, inside the RAV4. I'm not sure on the date in which all that was documented. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, one thing Buting should have said, yeah, let's bring the cabinet in here and recreate this.
Yeah.
And as far as the key's concerned, I believe in one document it says that the key and the lanyard's found in one part of the RAF, and then that the lanyard is found in a different part of the RAF.
Yes, yes, correct. The rest of the lanyard was found in the RAV4. So you've got the obvious tie-in of having the key and
But
the
one
rest of
says
the
the
lanyard.
front and one says the middle console and one says
Correct,
the back or something. Yeah.
correct,
And one
correct.
of them says key and lanyard and one says lanyard.
Yep, yep. Look, there's no doubt. Unfortunately, guys, we already know. We've done enough podcasts to realize that the documentation was very, very shoddy that was done. But you can see the damaging nature of that key to Stephen, because he's saying, I have no idea how the RAV4 got on here. The investigators obviously checked the trailer very, very carefully, went through it with a fine-tooth comb. When all the forensic analysis was done, there was no evidence of any crime having been committed, right? Then, as we know, we have the interrogation of Brendan, and he then described what took place in the trailer. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Kate is asking, did they not test for DNA on the lanyard that's attached to the key? Because the material would surely have held DNA from her.
Well, I'm not sure whether we actually have any results from the rest of the lanyard. I haven't seen it anywhere. But let me assure you that what Colhane did was that she swapped the key, right? And we know what happened there. First of all, when she observed the key, there was no signs of blood. Okay, so she couldn't do a presumptive test for blood. She saw no signs of blood. This immediately must raise suspicion, because the state is putting forward the notion that Stephen Avery was bleeding. He was actively bleeding. Now, quite clearly, he had to have used this key to start the car, according to the state. But we have a problem. If Stephen Avery is dropping blood within the Toyota RAV4 and near the ignition, it means that at the time, Stephen was actively bleeding. So if he's actively bleeding to leave blood on the ignition, why isn't there any evidence of any blood on the key or the lanyard? Now remember, the lanyard is fabric. That's going to absorb, especially blood. But Colhane admitted in court there was no signs of blood. Furthermore, she couldn't see fingerprints, hair, nothing. And guys, we all know what the analysis of that key was. Would anyone like to discuss what the results were? What results came back when Colhane swapped the key?
Nada.
Thank you, Sammy. Thank you so much. So essentially, when Colhane swabbed the key, there was no DNA from Teresa Horbach. There was no signs of fingerprints. There was no signs of blood, sweat, nothing. The only source of DNA on that key just happened to be Stephen Avery, right? And this is the bizarre thing, because a lot of the guilters were giving a hypothesis saying, well, he touched the key last, therefore he had completely stripped away all the DNA from the owner, right? Now, Teresa Horbach had that car for several years, up to the time of her disappearance, and there was not a trace of her anywhere on that key. Panel, does anyone find that remotely suspicious? Who would like to make a comment? Linda.
Oh, I could just say, anybody look at your keys, even if you've had your car for a year. Your key looks used. It's got dirt in it. It has just gunk on it. Even if you're the cleanest person, you're going to have
Yes.
that just from sticking it in and out of the ignition. So,
Yes.
and DNA at the amount that they found on Stephen would only be, as far as I'm concerned, like a buccal swab from the mouth. That was just too much.
Yes. Correct. Correct. The telltale, I think it was Buting asked Colhane how much DNA. Now I don't know the actual figure. I don't have it with me today, but you can check it in the trial testimony. The amount of DNA that was recovered was huge. It was not. It was not consistent with a simple touch DNA. So essentially, with touch DNA, um, whenever you touch an object, depending on the surface of the object, you leave behind skin cells. Scientists have worked out that you roughly leave behind 100 to 200 skin cells. The techniques that we have today are so sensitive that they can detect the presence of DNA even from a fingerprint. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, I had one on here from Myra, and she said they didn't test the hair that was found in the car.
That is
Dot, dot,
correct.
dot.
That is correct. Yes. So just going to answering Maya's question. Yes, I did find hair in the Toyota RAV4, and from my understanding, it was not forensically tested. Now, in defense of that, whenever you have a hair, if it doesn't have a follicle bulb at the end of the hair, you can't extract any DNA from it. So even if hair was found, if it doesn't have a follicle bulb right at the tip, you won't be able to extract DNA from it. And you could try it yourself, guys. You can pull out a hair from your head and have a look at it under just light, and you can see that little clear bulb at the end. That's where they extract DNA from. And that's what happened in Stephen Avery's, in the Penny Bernstein case, where they had the pubic hair that exonerated him, eventually exonerated Stephen. It had a follicle bulb, right? Only one hair did, and Colhane was able to extract DNA. So yes, to answer Maya's question, yes, they did find hair. It doesn't appear that they tested it. Millbilly.
And don't forget, when in trial, when Kratz talks about, oh, so if the key was planted, he then says, well, Stephen Avery the whole time is arguing that the cops are framing him. Kratz
Yes.
always twists it and states that, well, you got to think, if your officers killed her, you got to take that leap. Stephen Avery never said that the
Yep.
cops killed her. He just stated that he's being framed by them.
Correct.
He always twists what things are.
Correct. And guys, this is a common theme. Thank you, Millbilly. This is a common theme right throughout the trial, the way Ken Kratz worked. And you can see from the whole prosecuting team, they presented a unified face. How dare the defense even suggest that police planted evidence, right? How dare they? But furthermore, as Millbilly alluded to, Ken Kratz went one step further. He was saying, well, if you believe that the police planted evidence against Stephen to frame him, then you must believe that your police killed Teresa Horbach. Is that about right, Millbilly?
That's correct.
Yeah. So he had presented the case in court that, okay, if you're going to throw the allegation that your police officers planted evidence, then you must also accept that your police officers had killed Teresa Horbach, right? And so he was trying to make it sound so disgusting, so reprehensible. How dare anyone point a finger at their police as planting evidence? And of course, as Bill Billy alluded to, and his defense team, no one ever said that the police had killed Teresa Horbach. Guys, anyone on the panel have any comments about that? About what Ken Kratz actually did? BB.
I think he was trying to make it personal by saying your police. Personal
Correct.
to everybody and personal to the jury.
100% correct. And don't forget, we also had Teresa's parents and family in the courtroom as well. And Ken Kratz absolutely made it personal, because every time you mention Teresa, you have a look at his expressions. He completely changed. He acted like a grieving father, right? Which is really interesting. And he really turned up the emotions, playing to the judge, playing to the jury. He always referred to um, Karen's daughter. This is the bone from Karen's daughter. This is what Stephen Avery did to Karen, the parents, and etc., etc. So he indeed made it very personal. But getting back to the key is the key, if you know what I mean, because remember the information that Fassbender told Cohen, tried to put her in his garage or trailer. Well, lo and behold, we have the key, which is found in his trailer. But there's something bizarre. There's no evidence of Teresa Halbach's DNA, skin cells, nothing being present on that key. Only Stephen Avery's. But the problem was this, guys. The amount of DNA that was recovered from that swab was huge. In fact, my understanding was it was roughly 10 times that amount. 10 times that amount that you would normally expect. So, what do the guilters say happened? Well, Stephen Avery is a good shedder. Now, BB, do you have any comments?
Yeah, because they want you to believe he sheds like a cat in springtime.
Yes, correct. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, there was a comment on here by Glenn, and he said the key was a valet key, so would have turned in the ignition, but would not turn on the ignition unless it was coded to the car, because the
Yeah.
car had no power when the key was checked, so it's not verified.
Yes.
I have heard other people have other comments about how that could work. Do we have anyone here that might want to comment on that?
I'm not a car expert or a coding expert. Millbilly, do you have any comments about that or any suggestions?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Well, the important thing, guys, is this. Shariko Hain apparently took that key and she was able to turn the motor, as in it clicked over, but because there was no battery, obviously the car did not start. Oh, and the other thing that she said was that it opened a door, right? So Cohen apparently tested that particular key to see if it would open a door and crank over the engine, right? So now we've got this bizarre situation whereby if Stephen was the murderer, along with Brendan, why on earth would he keep the key? Why would he bother keeping the key in his own trailer? It honestly makes no sense. If he wanted to crush the car, all he would do was use an end loader to get it out there. If he wanted to crush the car, he would have immediately crushed the car, not leave it on his own lot for anyone to examine and find. So the whole key is very, very bizarre, in my opinion. So Kathleen Zellner did some tests whereby he got Stephen to hold the key. They took a key, a similar key, to prison and got him to hold a key for I think about 8 minutes in total.
No, he held it for
Millbilly.
a half hour.
Okay. And what was the amount of DNA recovered? Does anyone remember?
Nowhere near what it was found on that key.
Correct. So there you go about being a good shedder. Now, if you're going to make a comment, Linda, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say Mary 30 said it was 1.9 nanograms.
Right. Yeah, which was the amount of DNA recovered, 1.9 nanograms, I think was about at least 10 times more than what anybody else did, because I did some testing. Zona did some testing, and so the amount of DNA that was present on that key was huge. So that was a lot of DNA. So Zona got Stephen to hold a key as a test, and the amount of DNA recovered was much, much less from touch DNA. So to use the excuse that Stephen was a good shedder, hey, before you can say someone is a good shedder or a bad shedder, you need to do an experiment to prove it. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
I'm fine.
Okay, no problems. All right, so we have the key. Now, the interesting thing is this. Colburn, in an email, I'm not sure whether he wrote it to his boss, this was years later, mentioned that the key was not in the cupboard, but was actually behind the cupboard. Right? So his story actually changed where the key was. Millbilly.
Yeah, he wrote an email to the new district attorney right after Netflix came out,
Yes?
trying to dispute everything that was brought up in the documentary.
Yes.
And what he says in that email completely contradicts what they say happened in the trial.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely correct. So the question is, who's telling the truth? Why did he change his story? And as we know that Colburn is suing Netflix, so it'll be very interesting to see if he's questioned about the key and the email. So that'll be very interesting. All right. Now, on slide 167, Remeker was questioned about the presence of Lenk when item FL was found. And lo and behold, remember, we're talking about March, where the two bullet fragments were found in the garage after we get questioned Brendan about, okay, who shot her in the head? Well, Remeker admitted that Lenk was there when the garage was searched. Now, why would Lenk be present in the garage? Has anyone got a comment? Anyone got a reason why Lenk will be there? This is months after. Susan.
Manitowoc plants it. Callie
Yeah.
never found it.
Yes, yes. Susan, do you have a comment?
That's just what I was going to say. He had to be there to plant it.
Yes, that's a possibility. Linda, do you have a comment?
I hope everybody's saying it.
Yes, yes, yeah. So what we've got law enforcement from Manitowoc being present when all the major pieces of forensic evidence are being found, right? Especially the key, which is in Stephen Avery's trailer, and it only has his DNA on it, nothing from the victim, Teresa Horbach. And we have item FL, the bullet fragment that's found in the garage, and we have allegedly Teresa Horbach's DNA. So in effect, the key and the bullet item FL places Teresa Horbach in the garage and in the trailer. And yet forensically, there's no evidence of any crime having taken place either in the trailer or in the garage, which is really bizarre. So Remeker had to admit that yes, he did see Lenk in the garage. I think it was on March the 2nd when they went back in. But Millbilly, correct me if I'm wrong, but with a new batch of photos, there are photographs that actually show the compressor.
Yes.
Did you see any signs of bullets?
No. I've looked, zoomed in. No.
Right. So how on earth, months down the track, does a detective have to get on his hands and knees, looks under the compressor, lo and behold, a bullet is found? Their own photographs showed that there was nothing underneath the compressor. And yet, a bullet shows up. Linda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't they clean out that garage to do the luminol check? And I mean, they cleaned it out pretty well around that area, didn't they?
Correct. That they basically had to take everything out, and you can see photographs with the markings on the ground. And there's a video that shows them chalking the ground where they suspect that there was blood, and that they use luminol spray to look for the presence of blood and things like that. So yeah, Ken Kratz even asked, "So you emptied out the entire garage? You moved everything?" And the officer said, "Yes." So it seems rather bizarre that these two bullet fragments suddenly show up months down the track, right? And don't forget, guys, they also jackhammered the garage, sections of the garage where allegedly Teresa Horbach lay bleeding, profusely bleeding. And when they tested the concrete, did anybody find any DNA? Did anybody find any blood?
Nothing.
Millbilly.
Nothing.
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 Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. And so I think Kayla had made the remark about blood seeping down concrete. And so you got Kayla, you've got Brendan, two kids making these big statements or allegations. And of course, the investigators went in, jackhammered part of the garage, checked the concrete, no sign of blood, no sign of DNA. So they couldn't actually prove that Teresa Horbach was in that garage, Millbilly.
And as to Kayla, there's a call, jail call. You can hear Kayla in the background talking about the investigators were pressuring her to try to remember things that did not happen,
Yes.
make her say things that did not happen.
Yes.
But it's kind of hard to hear what she's saying because you got Steven going, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But she definitely was pissed off.
Yes.
Agitated.
Yeah. And of course, Millbilly, Kayla testified in court. And what did she say? She recanted everything.
Yep, she made it all up.
She said she made it all up. And so you've got two kids, Brendan, Kayla. I think Kayla was 13 or 14 at the time. Brendan was 16. And, Brendan had lost weight because of this, because of that. And the state really attacked him of all the comments that he made. And yet Kayla gets on the stand, cries, and said, "I made it all up. None of it was true." Right? So what's going on? It just simply is crazy. Nothing seems to match up. And that's why Stephen made the remark, the evidence don't make no sense. And I think, guys, we all agree on that.
He says that a lot of times.
Yes, in the calls. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, if we can actually now progress to slide 168. Susan, do you have a comment?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. If we progress to slide 168, now we don't actually have to spend too much time on this. And I'll read it out. In 2002, 1 year before Stephen's exoneration, evidence from his 1985 case file was sent to the state crime lab for DNA analysis. Lo and behold, on the evidence transmittal form, we have Detective Sergeant James Lenk's name on that form, right? And the allegation here is that Lenk potentially had access to Stephen Avery's blood vial from 1996. And when Lynn Zygmunt was questioned during the trial, she said, yeah, it was out in the open. Anyone with a key or access could have easily got access to the blood, right? The blood that was in the vial. And we have the photograph on the right-hand side on the bottom, where both Uyghur go and check out the blood and Gan. And he said that finding that blood vial was a game changer. They were terrified the fact that they found that blood vial. Does anyone want to make a comment about that blood vial? Linda?
Yeah, the blood vial does have a hole in it. That's how they get it in there. Everybody kind of
Yes.
knows that. But it doesn't leak out of it, doesn't get up in the seal. And
Okay.
Correct.
isn't there missing blood? There's a certain amount of blood that was missing from that tube. I'm not sure what milligram or whatever it was, but I want to say the blood doesn't go up in that seal like that unless it was taken off.
Correct. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, just the questions around the box that contained it. The
Correct.
fact that there's regular tape taped over the evidence tape
Yes.
obviously
Yes.
was opened, and
Yes.
it wasn't properly documented when it was.
Correct. Normally, what happens, guys, and I'll answer Linda's question as well. Normally, when you give blood, the purple top blood vial has got a rubber stopper on top, and it's under vacuum. So what happens is they place a device or a needle in your arm, obviously, in a vein, and they've got a device where they puncture the purple top tube. And because it's under vacuum, it draws the blood out of your arm. And they normally fill it between 7.5 to 10 mils. They fill up the tube of blood. They then mix it because it's got EDTA. EDTA is an anticoagulant. The blood remains in liquid form. Now, what is interesting is that clearly, when Buting examined the blood vial, it clearly was about half full. Blood had been taken from that blood vial. Now, yes, blood was taken because remember they extracted DNA for his exoneration case. So blood was taken from that blood vial. But what was interesting was that when the FBI measured the volume of blood, there was 5.5 mils in there. However, because they didn't document how much blood originally was in the vial, we don't know. But certainly that tube was half full. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, Myra C is saying there was blood under the seal, so it was opened. Yes,
Correct.
Dr. Silkman?
No question. Normally, what happens is that the blood is under a vacuum, which means that the only way blood is going to get on the seal is if they open up the purple top tube. Now, you normally don't put in an injection in that little hole to withdraw the blood. Normally, what you do is you take off the stopper and you take out blood in that particular way. So a lot of hoo-ha was done, regrettably, by Buting and Strang, saying that, the purple top's got a hole in it, so therefore they must have extracted the blood. No, that hole in the blood tube is normal. You normally puncture the purple top when you're collecting the blood in the first place. Sammy.
And she also asks, did anyone take fingerprints from the Scotch tape?
Not as far as I'm aware, but Millbilly said the right point. The box itself was opened, the tape had been cut, and normally what happens is when you go into forensic evidence, you reseal it with forensic tape, sign it, and date it. That's what you normally do. Now, quite clearly, if you're a planter, you're not going to put forensic tape and then write your name and date on it because it's going to identify you as you taking the blood. But no one can prove that Lenk or Colburn or anyone else took that blood vial. You can't prove it. But the mere fact that Lenk's name was on that form means that potentially he could have had access to that blood. Millbilly.
And you did not need a key to enter the evidence room. It had a push button 5-digit code lock to get in.
Code.
There's no cameras
Correct.
on the doors.
Correct. Correct. And remember,
And
if you're doing, sorry,
I'll
Billy.
point something out. Like, if you listen to the Calumet dispatch, there's a time where the evidence keys for Calumet's storage goes missing.
Goes missing.
They
Goes
don't know
missing.
where they are. Well, Jeremy Hawkins calls and says, "You're not going to believe this. I got the evidence keys in my pocket. I'm at Manitowoc right now,"
Right.
and tries to justify how it happened and when it
Right.
happened.
Right.
But he's going
Right.
to Manitowoc to collect evidence.
Yes. Yes, with the keys. With the keys. Yeah. Again, it's one of those things, Billy. But the point I'm trying to make is if someone wanted access to that blood vault, they could get it. Right? They could easily get it. So who's going to question someone like Lenk? Oh, what are you doing in the evidence room? What are you doing this? No one's going to question him.
Well, just like Uyghur and them wanted to try to claim they had 5 days to clean up, they had 5 days to plant everything.
Correct. Correct. So it actually works both ways. But it's very interesting that the very person that the defense is trying to say was involved in planting happened to be the person who signed his name that had the blood vial, right? So very, very interesting. But getting back to the blood vial, when they discovered the blood vial, the state was in a massive panic. And in actual fact, the state put up a proposition to suppress it, suppress the blood vial. Now, guys, anybody in the panel want to give their comment or opinion? Why would the state want to suppress the blood vial? Anybody? What would you want to do that for? Nobody? Why would the state want to? BB?
For hiding. For hiding. They were hiding.
Yes? Well,
Yeah.
here's the problem, right? It meant that the blood vial could have potentially been used as a source of blood to plant in the RAV. And the state wanted that suppressed because Stephen Avery and the defense put forward the notion that, hey, my blood was planted in the RAV4. So once the blood vial was discovered, Ken Kratz put up a motion to suppress it. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, Disco is saying on here, I read today that the FBI scanning would have destroyed the EDTA. Is that possible?
That's a really good question. I don't. You mean the scanning of the RAV4?
Yes.
Right. Well, you see, I highly, highly doubt it. I mean, EDTA is a chemical, right? They had a laser, and they were scanning the RAV4, but they were scanning the seats predominantly outside the RAV4. They took the seats out. I highly doubt it that the EDTA would have been destroyed. And don't forget, they already had taken the swabs from the RAV4 before the FBI got anywhere near it. So they actually had the swabs already out. Sammy.
Well, Glenn also commented that he'd read that EDTA deteriorates in the tubes as it has a shelf life.
Yes, it
How
does.
would it affect the deterioration of the EDTA to when not in a vacuum could have deteriorated?
Yes. Oh well, that's a really, really good question, and we're gonna discuss that on the next slide. Believe it or not. So if we have a look at slide 169, and this is where all the controversy takes place, because you've got two things going on here. First of all, you've got Stephen Avery that he was photographed with a cut on his finger, right? And what the state was saying was that the blood in the Toyota RAV4 came from that cut. So Stephen Avery was actively bleeding on October the 31st, and blood from his cut ended up in the Toyota RAV4. So as you know, Culhane swabbed the Toyota RAV4 and took the droplets of blood that were on the seats. She had cut them out. She did genetic analysis, PCR analysis, and the full genomic profile of Stephen Avery was allegedly found in those droplets of blood. Well, Stephen and his defense team put the proposition, no, that blood got in there because they planted it. So therefore, a source of the blood that a planter could have used, potentially used, was from the blood vial. And I've done a presentation on this. If anyone would like to have a look at it, essentially what you do, or what the planter did, was take a very small volume of blood from the tube, because if you have a look at the blood vial tube, there's blood on the lip of the plunger, of the purple top. Someone clearly opened up the tube, which means that the vacuum is lost, which means that air gets inside the blood vial. Now, the question is, can the EDTA break down? Absolutely. EDTA is a chemical. It doesn't last forever. So chemicals like EDTA eventually in time would break down. Susan, do you have a comment?
Well, if the EDTA had broken down, wouldn't that mean the blood would coagulate?
Not necessarily, because the coagulation process itself requires enzymes, coagulation molecules. So coagulation is a fairly complex process. And what the EDTA does, normally EDTA binds calcium and iron. The calcium is required for the enzymes to work so that you have the coagulation taking place. There, and I did a presentation actually talking about the coagulation process. Now think about it, guys. The blood is in a tube, right? Which means that in time, proteins break down. So it's going to be very difficult for those coagulation proteins to still be active 9 years later. So it's likely that the blood itself would remain still in liquid form. And guys, it was in liquid form. When butane showed Garn and Wiggett, the blood vial, it was still liquid. Sammy, do you have a question?
Yep. Glenn asked, could EDTA have deteriorated to the point it couldn't be detected between when it's planted and when it's tested?
Well, they tested the swabs. Now, you got to remember that we're talking about a blood vial from 1996. So if a planter used that blood, the blood would have been tested in 2005. So the blood already is about 9 years old. And the FBI didn't test that blood vial until a year later. So we're talking about blood that is at least 9 years old. Now, that means that during that time, the EDTA could have broken down. The FBI, LeBeau, admitted that they had to do a brand new test to test for EDTA. The problem was they have a detection limit. In other words, if the EDTA was below a certain value, I forgot the actual amount in I think it's, no, I won't even guess it because I've got those values in my presentation. If it fell below that value, you can't pick it up. So an absence of the EDTA does not mean that it wasn't there. It could have simply meant the EDTA was so low and it had broken down that his instrument couldn't detect it. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yes, not to put you on the spot or anything, but can
No.
you name the name of the presentation that you did on the blood for
Yes,
people to find it on our YouTube?
It's called Making a Chemist.
Thank you.
It's on our Foul Play channel. and I go through the planting scenario, and I actually present how the FBI tested for the presence of EDTA. And I wrote down a series of questions of all the issues and problems with the EDTA testing. Now, the FBI don't routinely test for EDTA, right? It's not a normal test. The last time the FBI tested for EDTA was in the O.J. Simpson trial. And we all know how that turned out. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Shara is asking, can KZ retest the blood in the tube using the same test the FBI used to see the results?
Well, the thing is, Sammy, thank you very much for that question. The thing is, her own experts said, don't bother. Her own experts, her own forensic experts said, you're wasting your time. Because if you find EDTA, there's a possible reason why you find EDTA. For example, there are a lot of car cleaning products that happen to have EDTA in them. And EDTA could be found maybe on surfaces. So here's the situation. If the FBI found the presence of EDTA, the state would have argued, oh, well, her car was cleaned with a cleaning product that had EDTA. When Culhane swabbed it picked up that EDTA. So you can go both ways. So Zellner's expert said, don't waste your time, right? The EDTA, no one tests for EDTA. It's sort of like, why are you doing it? Why are you doing this test? And in the OJ trial, what had happened was they did find EDTA in a sample, and hence the defense was able to say, the police planted the blood because they had EDTA. But what had happened was, years down the track, they discovered that when they cleaned the machine, right? When they cleaned the machine between samples, a little bit of residual EDTA remained in the machine. So when they tested the blood, they picked up the EDTA that was left in the machine. So it hadn't been properly cleaned, but they didn't know that. So am I concerned about the EDTA results? No. The only thing that Lebeau could say was that, hey, look, we tested the swabs. We didn't find any EDTA. It doesn't mean that there wasn't EDTA. They couldn't detect it, right? So, yes, EDTA does break down. And if you read the report that Lebeau wrote, it's on Stephen Avery org. It's 600 pages long, right? And there are other reports that state, oh, we guarantee now wait for this, a shelf life of the EDTA, I think between 6 months to 2 years. So in other words, the FBI are not prepared to back a sample that's 9 years old. Sammy.
Love Real is asking, curious if anyone knows offhand, was there a light blue top blood vial that they collected from Stephen Avery?
Look, unknown. I mean, normally, when you go for a blood test, yes, they use different types of tops: purple top, red top, blue top. They either contain anticoagulant or they don't, depending on the test that they're trying to do. Because sometimes you need to coagulate the blood and then do a test on what's remaining. So I don't know. I don't know whether that was indeed done. But remember, then you've got uncoagulated blood, and then you have to reconstitute it again if you're going to plant it. So it can get very messy. But whether they used a blue top, I haven't seen any records. That's not to say that extra blood was taken from Stephen. And it's ridiculous that the defense didn't track every time a blood test was done from Stephen, because there could be multiple sources of blood that we don't know about. Sammy, does that Does that answer the question?
I
We don't
believe
know.
so.
We
No,
we
we
don't
don't.
know whether we don't know
I
whether
haven't
the
seen any of the things that I've looked at in this whole entire case. I've never once seen any of that in evidence or in reports.
yeah, yeah. But that's not to say that, say, Stephen was feeling sick and they wanted to do certain tests, but they didn't take extra blood and put it in a vial that didn't contain EDTA or an anticoagulant. Sammy.
Well, listen, he had health issues while he was in
Yes.
jail. So there's no
Yes.
telling what kind of vials of blood they've gotten from him extra that we don't know
Correct.
about.
Correct. But again, guys, what we're doing is we're speculating. And so we have to be very, very careful. But we do know that there was a blood vial, and we do know that it could have been easily accessed. Millbilly.
Well, as to blood, why do they ignore A23 and CX? They don't even try to find out who it belongs to.
Yes, we discussed that in a previous podcast. Here's the irony, guys, right? We're talking about planting of blood, right? As a possible scenario. But here they actually had blood, which they found at the quarry, CX, and they had blood, which they found on the back door handle of the Toyota RAV4, item A23. The state does not know who deposited A23 or CX. Neither of which, or CX, doesn't appear to have been run through CODIS, and A23 doesn't appear to have been re-extracted to get a full genomic profile. Now, when blood is isolated and you do a PCR analysis, they also do what is known as an agenda marker. They can determine if the DNA is from a male or from a female. Cherie Cohane was able to exclude Stephen and I believe Brendan as belonging to item A23. So either the loci that came out were able to say, no, we can exclude you, or the gender marker came up as an XY chromosome. A males are XY, females are double X. So the obvious thing to do, as Millbilly and all of you guys have alluded to, hey, you need to re-extract A23. See what's going on. Who does that genomic profile belong to? Okay, so if I could just read this out. Thank you, Sammy. That's some really excellent questions there. So if we have a look on slide 169, I'll read it. The week before the state rests their case, they announced that the FBI has the results of its newly developed EDTA test. Remember, the FBI didn't have one. They had to start a brand new test from scratch, right? And they're able to do it in world record time. And in my presentation, I show the equipment and techniques that they use to detect the EDTA, right? And I'll quote, at a hearing, Judge Willis rules that the test results are admissible. And of course, what did Dr. Mark LeBeau find? Well, he found no EDTA in the 3 swabs from the RAV4. Now, think about this, guys. Did the FBI go in and re-swab the RAV4? Who's got a comment?
On here, I
Jamie.
have Miss Piggy saying A23 and CX are from the killer. And Cuss Road and Manitowoc Quarry hold the answers.
No question about that. No question about that. But we can do another podcast on just that. Yes,
Well,
excellent question.
Don't forget about the turnaround too. That's a key.
Yes, yes, no question about it. But quite clearly, a CX and A23 are very important pieces of evidence that need to be reinvestigated. Christy, did you have a comment?
Just that I thought it was real bogus that they accepted this test. How reliable was that test?
Yeah,
And
that's
no, I don't believe the FBI re-swabbed the RAV.
no, they didn't. So here's the problem, right? Stephen Avery saying, "Look, guys, I believe that the blood was planted uh, by someone from Manitowoc or a third party in order to frame me." What did the FBI do? The FBI said, "Oh, you're going to give me these swabs that um, potentially are contaminated. You want me to test these 3 swabs, do you?" So the FBI got a detective to go into the RAV4 and do control swabs. In other words, they did 2 swabs around where each blood spot was as a control. Christy, do you have a comment?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So the FBI did not go into the RAV4, subpoena the RAV4 and said, right, we're going to re-swab the entire vehicle ourselves. We're going to test our own material. They were reliant on the honesty from the crime lab. Now, remember, I also did a presentation in which Colhane potentially could have given LeBeau 3 swabs from the Pontiac Grand Dam. And we know that Stephen Avery bled in the Pontiac Grand Dam and that she swabbed the blood from the Pontiac Grand Dam. Colhane knew the genetic profile of each of the swabs. If she simply gave LeBeau or the officer who gave the swabs to the FBI, if Colhane swapped the swabs, you would not know because they would still contain blood on them, and the genomic profile from that blood, from that swab, is Stephen Avery's. The only difference is you've got blood from a vial that supposedly has EDTA and blood that's fresh. Blood that's fresh has got no EDTA. Well, when Mark LeBeau did his test, he stated, I didn't find EDTA in, now wait for it, not only 3 swabs, but 6 swabs. In fact, he only tested 3, didn't test the other 3, but concluded that those other swabs didn't have EDTA. Guys, is that the way you conduct science from the FBI?
Very inaccurate.
Unbelievable. BB, do you have a comment?
He must have ESP.
Correct. I
Yeah.
mean, this is
How unscientific is that? Just come on. Be for real.
it's actually mind blowing. And he even said it in court because Buting questioned him. Buting said, "Oh, I just wanted to check how far you would go." LeBeau actually gave a result on 3 samples that were never tested by the FBI. And he concluded that all 6 samples had no EDTA in them, even though he tested only 3, which is mind blowing. And so the overall problem here, guys, is the EDTA test reliable? Christy, do you have a comment?
Not for nothing, but at this point, even if they did test positive for EDTA, I believe the FBI would have said they didn't.
Well, guys, what can you say? You're really relying on people's honesty in this case. And remember, the FBI got badly burnt with the O.J. Simpson case on EDTA, right? And so the EDTA testing has all sorts of problems. And one of the issues is the reliability. Can you actually trust the results? So for the defense, Janine appeared on the stand, and boy, her testimony was real tough to read and go through. Essentially, she said, you could boil it down to this. Even though if you don't detect EDTA, it doesn't mean that EDTA wasn't present. it was maybe the EDTA had degraded or was so low in concentration that the FBI couldn't pick it up. So, in other words, the most you can say is, look, with our machine, with our setup, we couldn't detect EDTA. It doesn't mean that it wasn't there. We couldn't detect it. So, can you rule out a planting scenario? No, you can't. But was the state happy with the EDTA results? Of course they were. Guys, do we have any comments? Okay.
No, I think
Sam.
we've established this is very inconsistent. All of the answers that we're getting is very inconsistent.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So the state and the defense could have argued either way. And it's really interesting because the judge actually wrote a note expressing his frustration about the validity of the EDTA results. So even he was questioning whether they were valid or not. So Zellner's experts were told Zellner, don't even bother, you're wasting your time. So again, can you rule out a planting scenario? No, I believe that you can't. You cannot. All right, guys, we're making good progress. Let's have a look at slide 170, and I'll read it out. After the state rests, the defense files a motion to dismiss the false imprisonment charge. This is against Stephen Avery. It is the only remaining charge of the 3 that were added after Brendan's arrest. Now remember, when Brendan was interrogated, Kratz added 3 new charges against Stephen, all based on the confession. Millbilly, do you have any comments about that? About those extra charges?
No, it's no.
Now, the bizarre thing is this, right? They actually dismissed all 3 extra charges on Stephen, right? Now, the judge, or basically the defense and the state, were discussing whether they were going to call up Brendan to testify against Stephen. And in the end, they didn't. Right? Even the defense didn't call up Brendan because Brendan was so unreliable. Guys, any comments about that? Do you think the defense should have called up Brendan to testify?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Okay.
I agree.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Well, the remarkable thing, the defense didn't. They didn't call up Brendan. And it's rather bizarre. How damaging would have Brendan been in the trial? Bibi, do you have a comment?
I'm not sure that they would have been able to, since the cases were severed from each other. I
Yes,
think they
were.
deliberately severed the cases so that he couldn't be called.
I agree.
Yes. I think the state was trying to minimize the damage, the collateral damage that Brendan would have caused if he had appeared in the trial.
Well, just think about it. What if they had been charged together and they would have been co-defendants? Then they could have testified against each other. But no, they made sure there was going to be 2 separate trials, tried differently.
Correct.
For one murder.
For one murder.
Right.
For the one murder.
Yeah, one killer, Kratz says. There was only one killer. There's only one person that killed Therese Halbach, and that was Stephen Avery. So how do you explain all the rest with Brendan? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, really, really good point. So, I mean, when you think about it, let's think about this. Say Stephen did murder Teresa Hall. Just say. Stephen never admitted to doing anything. The star witness, the number one star witness, is Brendan, because Brendan was allegedly with Stephen. So, when with Brendan's coerced confessions, Ken Kratz added 3 more charges. Later in the trial, they dismissed those extra charges. All 3 charges were dropped. And as Strang said to the family, that's great, but all he has to be found is guilty on one of those charges, and that's it. It's party over. He's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. And so, in effect, it was an incredible strategy done by the state to drop those charges. It meant that Brendan didn't have to appear in the trial. But, of course, Stephen was eventually found guilty of murder. And so he faced life in prison. So it's a very interesting strategy by the state, the way they set the whole thing up. But this is what I can't understand. And guys, please help me on this. The judge asked Stephen in his trial whether he would want to testify. Right? Do you want to come up to the stand? Do you want to testify? And Stephen basically said, not quote, everyone knows I'm innocent. And he didn't testify. I'm going to ask the panel this. Was this a good or bad idea? Bibi, tell me, what do you think? Should
Well,
Stephen have testified?
I think
uh,
he should have.
Hold on, Billy. We'll just get Bibi first. I'll just go down.
I
Bibi.
definitely think he should have testified because obviously, look at the results without him testifying.
Yes.
Even though he maybe is not the best defense for himself at times.
No. So you feel that he should have at least said something?
Yes, I do. I think it was a bad mistake. I imagine that his lawyers probably made that choice for him because he was
Yeah.
really wanting to get his story out there. But
Yes.
quite often lawyers tell clients not to testify because if the jury doesn't like you, then they might take that out on you.
Yes.
And so I think that's part of where they went wrong.
Yes. Christy, do you have a comment? Thank you, Bibi. Christy, do you have a comment whether Stephen should have testified?
If Stephen could have testified without being cross-examined by the state, then yes. If he could have been controlled and asked controlled questions by Strang or Buting, yes. But Stephen was a loose cannon, and had
Yes.
there was no. So yes, I think he should have testified in his own defense, but I wouldn't agree with him being questioned by the state. And I think that was the reason, because you hear Stephen and all,
Yeah.
he's not listening to these attorneys, and any of the 6 months of phone calls I've listened to, they keep telling him not to talk to the media. He keeps talking to the
Yes.
media. And part of the problem is Stephen's not really saying anything wrong. It's the way he says it, and it's his intelligence level that gives
Yeah.
him the understanding of the question being asked to him. It's just a mess. So I completely understand why they didn't let him testify.
Yes.
So I have mixed feelings on that. Yes, he should have testified, but not as long as Ken Kratz was going to be able to talk to him.
Yes. And if you have a look at his interrogation sessions, right? The interrogators were trying to trip him up. Oh, didn't you say this last time? Or what do you mean by this? So they were trying to trick him at all the time to trip him up. Christy, do you have a comment?
And that's exactly what Ken Kratz would have done. And he would have been able to do it very easily with Stephen. It would have been very easy to trip him up. Very easy.
Yes. So in other words, if Stephen was going to testify, he would have needed written answers. He would have had to have read the answers out, because otherwise he would have got dates, times, events all completely screwed up. And of course, you've got Ken Kratz and his other fellow prosecutors with a ton of notes, right? Computer presentations. They would have completely destroyed and bamboozled him, right? So it's one of those things, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Kelly, do you have any comments? Should Stephen have testified in his own trial? Oh, I think Kelly's dropped out. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, when you were asking this question, Miss
Yes.
Piggy commented on here, and it was funny because I had the exact same thought. She said Stephen should have been given counsel to take the mistrial.
Yes.
The counsel, that he had was they were all just wanted it speedy trial and be done with it.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's very sad. But if I could just make the comment, how powerful would it have been for Stephen to have gotten up, eyeball to the Hallbach family, eyeball to eyeball in court, and say to them, it's a terrible thing that happened, but I never laid a finger on your daughter. I never was involved in this, and I did not kill your daughter. Just to have that chance to eyeball the family in court and say, I'm innocent. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, I think if Dean and Jerry would have been there for the preliminary trials, it'd have been a different story. I believe Stephen testifying would have brought Brendan into the picture in that court case.
Yes.
The fact that there's no evidence at all against President and he's only convicted by his words, and the only reason they were able to seal this on Stephen Avery was what Brendan said, because what he said was what they used to go back and get more evidence.
Yes.
You're supposed to follow
Correct.
the evidence, not go find it.
Yes. Yes. Correct. Correct. Thank you, Millbilly. Susan, do you have a comment? Should Stephen have testified in his own trial?
I would have loved to have seen Stephen testify, but I agree with Christy that having Kratz cross-examine him, I think.
Too risky? Way too risky?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if they would have asked him the question, why do you think the police are framing you?
Yes. Yes. And I don't think Stephen would have given. Well, he could have talked about the Penny case as well. But remember, the way Ken Kratz set this whole thing up was very, very clever. He said, oh, what happened in the past has got nothing to do with what happened now. So he was trying to trivialize what the MTSO did to him, the sheriff and the DA, and just made him focus.
But then they bring up the cat incident and then the Sandra Moore.
Correct.
They tell
Correct.
me that they contradict what they say.
Correct. Correct. Susan, thank you, Millbilly. Susan, do you have a comment?
I think that was it.
Yes. So to echo what Millbilly said, anything that made Stephen Avery look good in a positive light, they left out. Anything that made his character look really bad, they presented. The cat running off. And I don't even think they mentioned his cousin. They just mentioned a woman off the road, shotgun, the whole lot. So they tried to make him look as bad as possible. And Christy will echo this. Someone from the state was listening into the calls
and
for sure. Millbilly.
On Stephen Avery's activity report, the Penny Bernstein case is listed as attempted murder.
Yeah. 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 Which is very interesting because what did the judge say to Stephen when he was sentencing him? He said that your crimes have escalated.
Yep.
Right. So we went from running his cousin off the road to
And the officer, when Kukurk instructs him to do a rape kit, He
Yes.
questions, why am I doing this for an attempted murder case?
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Oh, look, we know what happened, Millbilly. And guys, it's as bad as it can get. Right? It's as bad. But for the judge to say that your crimes escalated, oh, wait a minute, he was exonerated. So, in essence, what the judge was trying to say, oh, look, I know you ran your cousin off the road, and there was a reason, and through his mentality and intelligence, that's what he wanted to do to
And
send a message.
you got to
Millbilly?
remember, the state made a mistake too when they released him in 2003. They cleared him of all charges, everything.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
why Kratz had to reissue the felon thing, because
For the gun.
it was a complete bullshit reason to arrest him. It's
Correct.
the state's fault that they didn't reinstate that felony charge for the Sandra Moore incident. The
Yes.
fact that he was able to go deer hunting in 2004.
Yes. Yes. Correct. But Millbilly, you have to agree. Once they charge him with a felon case, they can do a search warrant. Once they charge them, they can get buccal swabs, DNA, photographs, the whole lot. So you can see, first of all, arrest him and then
Well,
proceed from there.
first they detained him to obtain the DNA and fingerprints and palm prints. I believe
Yes.
they did not have the warrant for his arrest for the felon in possession of a gun yet, because
No.
when they're talking to him on the 9th, right after he talks about Tammy Weber and everything, they leave the room. And as soon as they come back in, Fassbender says, well, we got this warrant right here for your arrest. Do you want to see it?
Yes.
I don't think they
Yes.
had it yet. That's why they were stalling. And right after that,
Right.
then they really start to grill him
Yes,
about
they did.
the day of the
They
31st.
they did. So for any of our listeners, if you haven't, please have a look at the November the 9th interrogation of Stephen Avery by Wiegert and Fassbender. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right. Now, Linda, do you think Stephen Avery should have testified in his trial?
I don't think so, because if he would have had to been up there, both sides get equal time asking questions, and Stephen, I believe, would have been hemmed up by Kratz, and he's pretty damaged into himself, not trying to be, I mean,
Yes. Good point. Good
so
point.
I don't think it would have been a good idea, just because of the way the laws work and the questions that he would have been asked. They would have been
Yeah.
bringing up his past too much. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Christy, do you have a comment?
You're very right, Linda. He does do enough damage every time he opens his own mouth on his own. He didn't need Kratz to help him. He didn't. Being on the stand with
Yeah.
Kratz in front of him was the last thing Stephen needed.
Yeah. And Christy, do you believe that Ken Kratz would have actually used passages from the phone calls against him?
In questioning, quite
Yes.
possibly, I think he would have gone after him with Debbie and whatever else Stephen has had phone calls about that we don't know about, because we know he listened to him. So he definitely, there was a lot of things in those calls that Ken could have taken out of context and twisted and used against Stephen on that stand. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. For sure. Sammy, do you actually have a comment whether Stephen should have testified in his own trial?
Well, I listened to those phone calls too, and I think Christy has a very valid point in his discernment and his ability to, perceive what it is that they're asking him and how he should answer could put him in jeopardy. I just don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that goes to show how bad the system is. When you know you're innocent, you have done nothing wrong, but because of the way the legal system is set up, he could have incriminated himself without even knowing. And guys, we have a parallel here because we know how Fallon questioned Brendan, the way he tried to belittle him in court, because Brendan actually testified in his own trial. right? And he recanted. He said everything was a lie. But they went after him really big time. And the question they asked him, well, if you said everything was a lie, are you lying now? Why should we believe you? And so it's going to come down to that, isn't it, guys? Why should we believe you? And remember, his own nephew, Bobby, testified against Stephen. His own potential future brother in law testified against Stephen. So who was right? Who was wrong? Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Brendan should have said, because there's not one piece of evidence that says I did this.
Look, there's no doubt. I mean, guys, we can say here with perfect 2020 hindsight and look back and say this should have happened. I can't understand, why didn't his own attorneys think of this? Well, look what Paul Brendan had, and we'll of course discuss it. Len Kaczynski, Michael O'Kelly, those guys potentially were working for the state, right? It was a disaster. Zoe, are you going to be able to make a quick comment? Should Stephen have testified in his own trial? Yes or no?
I'm gonna go with no.
Okay. You want to give a reason as to why you should not?
Well, I think I agree with Christy and Linda. So it's
Okay.
it would have been good if he did say something, but Kretz is too big of a rat to trust him. So
Yeah. Thank you, Zoe. Yeah,
Well,
I appreciate that.
you also got to
Millbilly.
take into consideration that every day before the trial, they're communicating with each other on what they're going to talk about. So Kratz was already anticipating that Stephen Avery was not going to testify. Now, had he
Right.
changed his mind on the stand, Kratz would have been completely thrown off and not prepared.
Yes. Yeah. Linda. Thank you, Millbilly.
Just
Linda.
like when they bring up that her voicemails were accessed 2 days after
Oh,
she
God,
was
yeah.
allegedly killed.
Oh, God, yeah. Yep. They weren't. You could tell that Ken Kratz, he was in a blind panic. And the way he reacted, he was definitely not prepared. And even when he tried to answer the judge, he clearly had no answer for what the judge asked him. Linda, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say the lawyers go back and talk about what they're going to do, what they're going to let in, this and that. They're just, it would not have been in his best interest at all, because they would have been bringing up, like someone said in chat, the letters that he wrote his ex-wife on how,
Oh, yeah.
he was going to kill her and,
Yes.
things like that. And that would have been extremely damaging. And they would have had a right to use it, I guess, you know what I'm saying? Unless they agreed
court.
earlier at pre-trial not to. But I don't think they would have, the state would have said, no, we're not going to use that. They would have used it.
Yes, no question about it. Thank you, Linda. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
They could easily argue the fact that Kratz says himself for his past has nothing to do with this. So, like, it's just, I don't know. I believe it would have helped them, but then there's a chance that
Yeah.
Kratz could have turned it around. I don't know, but
Yes.
The past only
Linda.
means something when it's on their benefit.
Oh,
exactly.
correct. Christy, do you have a comment?
And I'm not a lawyer, but I'm also under the impression, and I've seen this happen in other cases, where a lawyer or a prosecutor will lead a witness into a certain line of questioning very carefully to get them to say one specific thing so that they can open up a whole new line of questioning. And
Yes.
Kratz, Gahn, and Fallon absolutely would have done exactly that.
Oh,
And Buting and Strang could have objected all they wanted, and what's his face would have overruled their objections, and he would have let it continue.
Correct.
Yes, I agree, Millbilly. Stephen should have absolutely gotten on that stand and defended himself if there was a way to do it without him being cross-examined by the state.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to me, I understand it would have been a real massive risk, but if you're innocent and you haven't committed this crime, to me, it would have made a powerful statement, not only for Stephen to say everyone knows I'm innocent, but to eyeball the Hallbach family and admit that you're innocent and tell them that you're innocent, rather than have just all the lawyers say it for you. But you're correct, guys. The potential damage would have been huge, potentially could have been huge, and made it look even worse for Stephen. All right. Well, look, guys, I'm conscious of the time. We're progressing really well. If we have a look at slide 171, this is basically, they have 2 days of closing arguments. So basically, we all know what closing arguments are. It's basically giving a summary. And of course, the state are going to say why Stephen Avery committed this crime. And the defense are going to say why Stephen Avery didn't commit this crime. Well, we all know how the verdict turned out. And Stephen Avery was found guilty on murder. And remember what Strang said? All they need to do is to show one charge, and he's going away to prison for life. So, guys, really, what else can we say? That was the verdict. I found it very interesting when the judge said to Stephen that he was the most dangerous person to be in that courtroom. Guys, do we have any comments? What do you think about that? Was he the most dangerous person in that courtroom? Millbilly.
No, he wasn't. It's uncalled
Yes.
for.
Yes. Christy.
The prosecutor was the most dangerous person in that courtroom.
Yeah. The second most dangerous person was Kratz himself, I would say. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, we all know that they painted him out to be this demon monster,
Yeah.
in the media. So, but when we dive into all of the calls and everything else that we've been thrown, you can tell he sticks with his whole story.
Yes.
And you can tell this is painted in Kratz is probably the one that was the most dangerous person in the
Yes.
room. Not
I
second
agree.
dangerous.
The most dangerous. Christy, thank you, Sammy. Christy, do you have a comment?
With the way they painted him, I mean, he's not the greatest guy in the world. He's not the nicest guy in the world. I'm not going to try to hide that fact. I mean, we hear it in his phone calls. He's controlling.
Yes.
He's on the edge of verbally abusive to some people. I mean, he's opinionated and he wants it his way and he thinks he's king of the hill and he thinks he's entitled. And I can't say that I blame him, but the last thing that man was dangerous. I don't think he would have hurt anybody in the way that they keep saying he would have. There's just no, I just don't buy it. He's a man who loves his mother. He loves his girlfriend.
Yes.
As toxic as their relationship, he wasn't the monster they created him out to be. Was he the greatest guy in the world? No, but he's not the monster they made him out to be. He's not.
Yeah. But unfortunately, he's, like you said, Christy, his character, his demeanor, they could have easily built up a picture of him being a real evil, nasty monster, a wife beater, a sexual assault. They really could have painted a nasty picture of Stephen Avery if they wanted to. And that's precisely what they were trying to do throughout the trial. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, just taking, for instance, that phone call when he calls Barb and Scott blows up in the background.
Oh, yeah.
Steven's cool and level-headed the whole time.
Yes.
He doesn't make any outbursts. He just calmly talks.
Yes. Yeah. And that really lit up both Barb and Scott, which is remarkable. But I would dare say that he got a lot of information from likely Kathleen Zellner to say exactly what Stephen said that triggered everybody off, which was a masterstroke when you think about it. So, yeah, well, I still can't believe that the judge said, A, that you're the most dangerous person that ever stepped foot in the courtroom, and B, the remarkable thing was the judge said to him, well, you tried to do good in your life, you tried to improve your life, as in he got exonerated and he tried to improve his life, but look at the way he changed his image. He cleaned himself up, he looked good, he had a fiance, he wanted to get married, settle down. um, he had the civil lawsuit, and the judge even said you're going to come across to a lot of money, and even the judge couldn't understand what motive Stephen would have to slaughter a 25-year-old photographer. I'm sure even the judge couldn't have thought of why. But the judge said to him, your crimes have escalated. Well, how can they escalate from running his cousin off the road to slaughtering Teresa Horbach, or the victim, which is rather remarkable. So that's what I potentially found quite disturbing from the judge. Guys, anybody have any other comments? Okay. So, guys, I am conscious of the time. And I think if we finish on slide 172, this is really the reactions to the verdicts. And as you can see, the Horbach family, expressionless, right? They look like this throughout the entire trial when the verdicts were being read. Of course, the Avery family, you can see the mother, just shock, disbelief. Remember, the whole family had gone through this a second time. And what do we have between Fallon and Ken Kratz? Well, they're laughing. As the caption says, winners are grinners. And Ken, you can see he was photographed smiling like a Cheshire cat because he'd won the case. Guys, do we have any comments? Linda.
You can just tell that he's like, haha, one for the team. Up goes my paycheck.
Yes, indeed. Susan, do you have a comment?
It seems to me that the Hallbox would be so relieved that they would actually cry.
Yeah. Look, what is remarkable, and I still thank you, Susan, and I still can't work this out. When the box of bones were being displayed, and Ken Kratz was saying that this is the daughter of, etc., etc. Her that was same expression, no expression, no emotions, no feelings, no crying, and chewing gum. And when the verdicts were read out, exactly the same thing, no expressions at all. And I don't know. I know people grieve in different ways, but have a look at the attorneys. They're laughing, they're smiling like a bunch of Cheshire cats. And it just the contrast in the two families, and it's just a terrible, terrible situation. But look, guys, I reckon what we could do, we can actually finish on slide 173, and we can continue this in our next podcast, because not only did they interview the winning team, they also interviewed the defense. And you could tell by Strang and Buting, especially on the look on Buting's face, utter devastation. They tried their best, they gave it their best shot, but it had a devastating effect. And interesting that one of the jurors who was excused, they interviewed him, Richard Mailer, because remember, apparently there was an accident in his family and he had to be excused. Well, he talked about the fact that there were bully boy tactics going on. And don't forget, 7 of the jurors initially said not guilty. 7 of them. Does anyone want to make any on that. So the tide had to have turned pretty badly for them to get a unanimous verdict against Stephen, right? And it's just remarkable. Something must have happened. And Millbilly, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Remeka reprimanded?
Yes, he was.
And didn't they bring pizzas and all that sort of stuff to
Yes.
the jury?
Yep, he let somebody in the jury room that shouldn't have been there.
Right.
And he was
Right.
just given a slap on the wrist. Nothing really happened.
No.
He was advised if it
No.
happened again, he'd be reprimanded and probably lose his employment.
Severely. Yeah, severely. And guys, as a final comment, look at what Sergeant Andrew Colburn says, right? And this was on the news, and I'll read it. I hope and pray that this verdict helps put to rest any suspicions or loss of confidence that this community may have felt towards our department. And I quote, because I assure everyone that this agency has some of the finest law enforcement officers in the country in its employee, which is remarkable that Andrew Colburn come out on the news and say that. So, guys, do we have any final comments? Bibi, any final comment?
Yes, I'd just like to thank everybody for tuning in, and I'd like to tell everybody to have a good weekend.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bibi. Christy, any final comments?
Same. Thank everybody for joining us. Check out Linda Kay's YouTube channel. Her and I will be talking about the calls on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Check out Millbilly's channel. He's got tons of videos that are very informative. I've had the chance to catch up and watch a lot of them recently. Excellent work by everybody involved in this case. And I just want to reiterate how important it is that we all work together. And there's really no reason for any division or anything like that. We're all here for the same reason.
Correct. Absolutely. Thank you, Christy. Millbilly, any final comment?
Just hit the like button, y'all.
Thank you very much, Millbilly. Susan, do you have any final comments?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same sadness in my gut that I had watching Ma'am when they pronounced him guilty. And it's just such a miscarriage of justice. And I want to thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Susan. Thank you very much for all your comments.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Very much appreciated. Zoe, do you have any final comments?
I want to wish everyone all the best in 2020. It's the first podcast in 2020 for us.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Thank you so much, Zoe. Sammy, do you have any final comments or questions from the YouTube channel?
No, everyone here is participating very well, and I just want to thank them all for their wonderful questions, and I really appreciate it. And I hope you come back, hit that bell to get notification once you've subscribed.
Yes, and did we have our good friend the Guilter on today in the channel?
I haven't had any visits.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't hear any questions come up from it.
Yes, of course. We do welcome questions from everyone. Linda, do you have any final questions?
That I've had a great time. I think what you guys are doing great. Please, everybody, listen to the calls. They're so telling. They really, really are. And these guys are doing a great job. I was really an honor to be here, and check us out on Tuesday with Christy on my channel.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, look, guys, just a personal comment, just a couple of things. First of all, I'd love to thank the listeners and the support that you guys have given us over the journey. We still, of course, will be doing more podcasts and TTTs. And please check out the excellent YouTube channels from members of our panel that contain a lot of excellent information about the case. I would like to thank, and the panel would like to thank, both Susan and Linda for coming on and giving us their foresight and comments. It's greatly helped the channel. It's greatly helped the podcast. And we thank both of you guys, Susan and Linda. Thank you so much. And I like to say, look, guys, we're in it here for the boys. We're here to see justice for the boys. This case is so important. It touches people on all sorts of levels. And by your continual support, by educating people, hopefully we can see the shenanigans that took place, and we want to make sure that this never occurs to yourself or your own loved ones. Very important that the heat is turned on and this case is at the forefront all the time. Thank you so much, guys. And as usual, I'll catch you all next week. And please join us in Discord for any comments or discussions. Thank you so much, guys.